Welcome to the Fast Leader Podcast, where we uncover the leadership life hacks that help you to experience breakout performance faster and rocket to success. And now, here's your host, customer and employee engagement expert and certified emotional intelligence practitioner, Jim Rembach.
Call Center Coach develops and unites the next generation of call center leaders. Through our e-learning and community, individuals gain knowledge and skills in the 6 core competencies that is the blueprint that develops high-performing call center leaders. Successful supervisors do not just happen. So go to callcentercoach.com to learn more about enrollment and download your copy of the Supervisor Success Path ebook now. Okay, Fast Leader Legion, today I'm excited because we have somebody on the show today who's going to help us build continuous customer relationships. Nicolaj Siggelkow is the David M. Knott Professor of Management at the Wharton School, University of Pennsylvania. He is a co-director of the Mack Institute for Innovative Management and the former department chair of Wharton's Management Department. He studied economics at Stanford University and received a PhD in business economics from Harvard University. As recognition of his groundbreaking research on strategy, Nicolaj has been elected as a fellow of the Strategic Management Society, the leading association of strategy researchers in the world. He has been the recipient of more than 30 MBA and undergraduate excellence in teaching awards, including the Lindback Foundation Distinguished Teaching Award, the highest teaching award of the University of Pennsylvania, and the Helen Carden Moss Anvil Teaching Award, the highest teaching award of Wharton. Professor Siggelkow is the academic director of several open enrollment executive education programs at Wharton and has been involved in many custom programs for organizations, teaching strategy and managerial decision-making. He has run strategy workshops for small organizations to Fortune 500 firms, helping them develop and analyze their strategies. He has developed the online course Business Strategy from Wharton's Competitive Advantage and is the co-host of the weekly Sirius Radio Mastering Innovation. And he's the co-author of Connected Strategy, Building Continuous Customer Relationships for Competitive Advantage. Nicolaj Siggelkow, are you ready to help us get over the hump?
I hope so.
I know you will. I'm glad to have you here. Now, I've given my Legion a little bit about you, but could you tell us what your current passion is so that we can get to know you even better?
Well, of course, my current passion has to be my current research, right? I cannot lie, but this is what I've been doing for the last couple of years. Together with my good friend and colleague, Christian Terwiesch, we've been thinking about this idea of how firms radically change the way they interact with their customers. And it has been actually fun, kind of, because what we've been able to do is while we were writing the book, we were teaching it. And that was kind of really a fun thing to do together with my MBA students and our executive audiences, sort of to try things out, see whether it actually resonates, so that they're saying, well, this is not just an academic exercise, but actually I can use it. And so this has been actually a quite fun experience, and it's also my first book, so it feels like my first baby, right? That I get out there. So it's been a quite exciting ride right now.
Well, I can imagine it is. The work that you are doing. And talking about specifically in the Connected Strategy book is you have several case studies and essentially shop, and you call them workshops, that people can actually use in order to help them with their practice of strategy. And I think that's one of the things that's critically important for all of us is, we can take all this knowledge and wisdom that's book knowledge, but until we can actually apply it and practice it, we're not going to get that good at it.
Yes. No, and I think that was really the intention of this book, and which makes it a bit different indeed that we have like these workshop chapters where we guide kind of the reader through. Here's a worksheet, fill it out, kind of, right, and try it. And we say at the end of the book, kind of, right, sometimes again this might feel a bit daunting, right? Oh gosh, there are all these things to do, and so at the end of the book say, well, maybe just do a few things, right, to get your toe in the water. We don't want to push you into the water, but maybe force you to put your toe in the water, kind of, to get going and thinking about these issues.
I think that's important when you start looking at a lot of things today. And we're going to get into something that I think is really important when you start talking about the coaching aspect of the customer experience. But before we do that, I think it's really important to talk about when you start referring to this connected strategy, what does it really mean? And in the book you say is that a firm with a connected strategy, or firms, they fundamentally change how they interact with their customers and what connections they create among the various players in their ecosystem. At its core, a connected strategy transforms traditional episodic interactions with customers into connected customer relationships that are characterized by continuous, low friction, and personalized interactions. So when you talk about this magic of connected strategy, you talk about a place that has magic, and a lot of us that reference in Disney.
Right.
So when you're referring to that definition, kind of give us some insight into how that flows.
Yeah, so there are really kind of two parts of a connected strategy. So one is kind of this idea about really transforming these interactions with customers, right? Sort of rather than kind of waiting for a customer to come to me with their particular need, can I maybe even anticipate the need that the customer has, right? And that might allow me to actually have a much better personalized interaction that might able to me to anticipate needs that the customer has. So rather than having these episodic interactions, think about something bad happens to me and I go to the hospital, right? Only then do I interact with my healthcare provider, now having a much deeper connection with my healthcare provider through my Fitbit or my Apple Watch, right? So that's kind of the one part of a connected strategy. It's almost like the what, right? What do I provide to the customer? The second part of a connected strategy is the how, right? How do I actually create these connected customer relationships at a reasonable cost? Because again, right, I know how to make me happy in terms of healthcare. I just have a nurse and a doctor standing right next to me 24 hours 7, right? That would make me better, but it's very expensive, right? And so I think this is a part of where technology plays an interesting role of how we're able to connect me to resources in a much more efficient way that can actually create these, good connected customer relationships.
Okay, so and as you're talking about those different dynamics, one of the things that you also present, when to me, what I was interpreting is something, and you didn't use the word necessarily a ton, but disruption.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of this connected strategy is all about, disrupting, traditional paths, traditional journeys, traditional, interaction methods and types and frameworks. And one of the things that you talk about is the efficiency frontier.
Yeah.
Explain to us what that means.
Yeah. So usually we can think about, so there's a natural trade-off between how much value I provide to a customer or how happy I can make my customer through a particular product or service and the cost it takes me, right? So if I just made this example of, you can really improve my happiness as a patient if I would have immediate personal access to a doctor standing right next to me, but that would be also really, really costly, right? And then on the other hand, I might have just some telemedicine where I go to a website and I try to educate myself. My happiness of that is much lower, but also the cost is much lower, right? I just have a website I can go to, right? So there's this usual trade-off between what we call the willingness to pay, or kind of the value that the customer perceives in the product, and the fulfillment cost that it takes us to create that value in the eye of the customer, right? So there is a kind of a frontier, if you wish, of an efficiency frontier of the most amount of service you can provide given amount of cost that you want to incur. And so within any given industry, there is sort of a frontier, and different firms have placed themselves at different parts of this frontier. Some people are very high service but high cost providers. Others are sort of low cost, low service providers. Now, what these connected strategies effectively have done is they've sort of pushed out this frontier, right? And so now all of a sudden there are firms that can do both better. So again, imagine, let's say Uber or Lyft, right? I think it's a good example. So Uber's, kind of my value I receive from using an Uber or Lyft is somehow higher than the one from a cab, right? Usually it gets there faster. Usually it's nicer. Usually it's much easier to pay, right? So my utility, my happiness as a customer has gone up. While at the same time, the cost that Uber has of providing a ride from point A to point B is actually less than a cab company has, right? And so now it's a firm that can provide a better service at a lower cost. And that is really what drives disruption, right? Sort of that's all of a sudden now it's not just a trade-off anymore, it's actually better on both dimensions. And that is really disruptive. And so kind of from the perspective of the existing firms, it feels like, whoa, where's this trade-off, right? This trade-off is gone. Of course, it's still there, but it's just now at a higher level, right? And so this is exactly when we think about fintech or insurtech or IoT devices, et cetera. All of a sudden, right, customers say, wow, this is a product that I actually, or a service that I value more than what I'm currently getting, and they can actually provide it at a cheaper price. Whoa, right? I like that. And so that's exactly what drives disruption.
Well, as you're talking, I'm starting to think about, too, the whole development process. and thinking about how, it does become easier in order to get people to actually form new habits. So if I'm thinking about this whole frontier component and element, yes, I push it out. Yes, I can do, potentially both things better. That isn't always the case, but, I have to go through a testing phase. And so I'm thinking about rapid development, rapid deployment, rapid, adjustment and iteration. I'm also thinking about, rapid mothballing. Hey, that didn't work.
Yeah.
So there, to me, there's a whole lot of other components and elements that go into this strategy that, we have to take into consideration. So where does that come into play in regards to the whole journey and the consideration and being able to create the connected strategies?
I mean, so the interesting thing is about a lot of these connected strategies actually are not about technologies, right? Sort of, technologies clearly enable it to happen. But quite often the companies who create these new strategies, they have not created that technology. So again, let's think Uber, right? Uber did not develop GPS, cell phones, and Google Maps, right? But they say, look, if I take these three elements put together, and now kind of coming back to our earlier discussion, now if I'm connecting previously unconnected parties, here are people with cars in a little bit of time, here are people who need a ride. Wow, I can use these technologies to create these new connections. And all of a sudden I have a new business model that's rather disruptive, right? And so I think, again, what we're stressing in the book, in some sense, the good news is in order to create a connected strategy, you don't need to be a technology company, right? Actually, a lot of these technologies that underlie connected strategies are out there, more or less available to anyone, right? And so really the creativity is much more on the business model side, right? Of really trying to understand, hey, what's that pain point that a particular customer has? And with this particular information and this particular technology and this particular new connection, now I can create a new business model. That's really where the creativity lies.
Well, I think you just hit on really one of the most important factors here is being able to go through that creative thinking process and being able to understand how it could formulate new innovative elements that you can fit now into your framework. So, all right. So if I'm looking at an organization or organizations as a whole and looking into the opportunities that exist with the connected strategies, I mean, where do you see some of the biggest opportunities?
Well, so I think the interesting thing is that when we ask managers quite often, so what drives the happiness of your customer, right? Because ultimately that's what it's about. We were trying to attract customers to our products, right? And our services, our companies. And so when we ask them what are sort of value drivers that your customers have, they very quickly focus on tangible and intangible aspects of their product, right? So how fast is my product? How good is it? How many features does it have? Maybe what kind of brand perception do I have? Now, all of this is, of course, important. But what we are, again, stressing in our book is there's usually a much longer customer journey that the customer has with you, right? That sort of starts out at the customer first actually has to become aware of a need that they have, right? Then the customer has to understand, okay, now that I know what my need is, what are all the options out there that I might be able to use, right? So I'm aware of my need. I need some, let's say, need to save for retirement. Okay, now finally I got aware of that need. But now, what are all the options? I don't even know, right? What are all the options out there? Then what is actually the best option for me to use, right? Then, okay, now I think I know what I need and I want, but how do I get it? Do I need a broker? Can I do it myself? Right? How do I pay? Right? How does it work? Well, so there are so many different steps before actually, how good is your financial product? Right? How good are your fund managers? Now, this is important too, right? But there are lots of other pain points that the customer has, right? And so I think quite often these connected strategies start out by really having a deep understanding of kind of the pain points, or what we call also the willingness to pay drivers, the way kind of to delight customers along this entire customer journey, and ask how can we also remove some of those frictions from the customer journey, right? And that's quite often sort of a starting point for thinking about, how could we create a better relationship with the customer?
All right, I start seeing a lot of skill sets required in order to be, the most successful here. I'm starting to think about the ability to understand and separate the difference between divergent and convergent thinking. I'm starting to also see, the understanding of emotion that, goes into play with the whole brand loyalty, as well as being able to modify behavior that I used to essentially, like going back to the Uber and Lyft thing, I used to hail a cab. Now I'm using an app. I mean, all of these things, there's so much friction along the way.
Yeah.
So, I mean, how is it most beneficial for an organization to approach this entire process if they haven't really done it before? It's just kind of happened, right? Or we've been hanging, our hat and our revenues on a particular product that is now, 20 years old, and now we have to start going through this process. Otherwise, we're going to get disrupted.
Right. So kind of just in terms of process-wise, I think we would suggest, to really think about different customer journeys that your customer have, trying to understand these pain points, then asking yourself, what are kind of the information that we need kind of to resolve these pain points. But, I wanted to piggyback a little bit on the word of emotion that you mentioned, because I think that is really important. So we're describing a different set of what we would call connected customer experiences that you can create as a company, right? So one we call respond to desire, which is where a customer knows exactly what he or she wants, right? I need a car right now to take me from the airport. I need an accommodation in Chicago next weekend, right? So a customer knows exactly what they want, and they want to just press a button, and you as a company want to make sort of the rest of that journey as smooth, as frictionless as possible, right? And so in some sense, if you think again about that customer journey, that is sort of a customer experience that works at the end of that customer journey, right? It already starts just at the moment of when you're ordering, and then it goes through kind of post-purchase experience. But there's a different connected customer experience we call curated offering. So this is a experience that helps you actually understand what are the best options out there for me, right? So if I go to Netflix in the evening and say, I'm in the mood for a comedy, and Netflix says, that's great, we've got 10,000 comedies for you, that's not helpful, right? But if Netflix could say, here are the 5 that you might like, okay, I would appreciate that, right? And oh, by the way, here's a new release that I didn't know, right? So it's not like I know exactly what movie I want to watch and just stream it right now, but if you can help me in that process, I have some, and so we would call that a curated offering. Then we can go even one step further, and that is becoming aware of your need. And that is really this coaching behavior that we're talking about, right? So I know I need to take my medication, but I'm forgetful, right? I want to lose some weight, but sticking to my diet is hard, right? So a lot of customers would like to achieve certain goals, but actually it's hard for them to do, right? There are biases, there's inertia. And if I can help you as a company do that, that's potentially helpful for me as a customer. And then the fourth experience we call automated execution, where the firm basically knows about your problem before you are even aware of your problem and solves your problem, right? So that would be my printer that knows it's about to run out of ink, but then it just reorders itself, right? And so my ink arrives kind of before my printer runs out of ink, right? And now the important point, and this is sort of why I'm piggybacking on your word emotion. So the important point is to understand that different customers will have very different preferences of how they want to interact with you as an organization, right? Some customers would love automatic execution, everything in my life. Others find it really creepy, right? I mean, how did you know that I was running out of soda, right? Why is that this FedEx guy handing me a package, right? Some people will find this is amazing. Other people will find this is creepy, right? And so we really have to understand how people react emotionally, psychologically, kind of, right, to having the environment act upon you, right? One person loves another mother, petting on their shoulder, say, hey, you should eat better or whatever, right? And another person said, well, I don't need that again, right? Sort of, turn it off, right? And so, companies will have to create a whole array of different connected customer experiences, and again, still really understand each customer very well to know, what's the right connected experience that this customer likes, and even the same customer might want different ones, right? So if I sit down in front of my TV, I'm not sure I want Netflix to immediately start streaming a movie, right? And I have to say, Nicolaj, I know what you want. Here it is, right? And no, well, just give me 5 maybe, and then I can pick, right? And so I think this becomes really, really important to be successful in implementing a connected strategy.
Okay, well then, when I start thinking about the emotional intelligence, and infusing that and putting that into your organization, I start also looking at the immense amount of data that often exists, especially when you start talking about customer interactions, and a lot of that is historical in nature. So it's post-mortem activity and insight. But however, what we're talking about is projecting it forward. So now I have to be proactive, reactive, speculative.
Yep.
I have to forecast. I have to do all of that, and I start looking at the importance of that post-mortem data, that data that has already occurred at dead, into us being able to maybe pivot and take a different direction. I mean, where does that type of, work, where does that type of activity really take place best for organizations?
Yeah. No, again, right? Obviously, data is really, really important, but again, just sort of one word of warning, I guess, is that connected strategies are actually not fundamentally about data. Connected strategies are fundamentally about understanding customer needs. And once I understand them, then I actually know what the relevant data is, right? So I think a lot of companies currently are actually exactly stuck at this point, where because it has become so easy to collect data, right? So I'm now sitting on gigabytes of data about you. I know every click you've done on every website you've ever visited, but I have no idea what to do with this, right? And so unfortunately now a lot of companies have said, well, I don't know, but there's someone else who wants to pay me a few pennies for this information. Well, let me just sell it off. Right, and so a lot of firms have gone that route, right? And now you, as a customer, are being followed by the same ad, right, on whatever website you click, and you ask, "How the heck did that happen?" Right, because someone sold my information, right? And so, what we would recommend is actually really start with the needs of the customer, right? Again, with that customer journey, and then ask yourself, okay, what kind of information would I need to solve that particular problem? And maybe I don't have it yet, then I need to think about how can I get it, right? But I think engineering it that way around turns out to be, I think, way more manageable again, right? Because I think you've mentioned this earlier, kind of, right? So if I have never done this, right, how would I even start? And I think a lot of companies have started by saying, well, I guess it's all about data, so let's collect data, right? And again, this is relatively easy to do, but that now they're stuck, kind of, right? And they have no idea what to do with it, and quite often, again, they just sell it off. So again, starting with the customer journey, starting with those needs, and then reverse engineering what information I need is quite often a much more efficient way to do that.
Well, as you were thinking too, I started thinking about the problem that organizations have with with quantitative data and qualitative data, right? So in other words, I have, the number of clicks, I have all of these things that are more quantitative in nature. However, I don't necessarily have insight into the qualitative data that tells me why all of those things are occurring and happening. And understanding what we were talking about as far as that customer emotion piece, I mean, there's oftentimes is a very core missing element to all of that will prevent them or cause them to going in the right and or wrong direction. So and I think it goes back to what you were talking about, is the whole emotion piece. Now but ultimately, when it all is said and done, there's revenue models that we have to focus in on. If we're not generating revenue, all of this is for naught.
Right.
And you talk about like 6 different revenue models that need to be considered. Can we go into those a little bit?
Sure. So the intriguing thing about connected strategies is that all of a sudden, sort of the space of dimensions that I can use for a revenue model opens up, right? So in the traditional model is, right, you come to a store and you buy a product and you pay the amount and then you own the product, right? That's kind of the most traditional way. But what's the problem with that? The problem with that is that I basically, as a company, have to extract basically all the future value that you see in that product at that point of purchase, right? And that might be quite hard, right? So let's take a example. Let's say I'm trying to sell you a wonderful, great new toothbrush that I promise you will detect cavities and will prevent you from having cavities in the next 5 years, right? And you say, wow, that would be an amazing product, right? And I say, okay, I'll charge you $600 for it. And you say, oh, wait a second, right? I mean, if it truly worked, I'd be happy to sell, to pay you $600, but how do I know it works, right? So the traditional problem in the traditional revenue model is I put all the risk on you, right? So, well, trust me. I say, right? Now, that's hard. So now with the connectivity, so now imagine my toothbrush is connected. So I can understand when you're brushing, how you're brushing every day. So now I could actually offer you a performance guarantee, right? I say, okay, if you don't get a cavity and you use my toothbrush in the way I'm asking you to do so, right? And you will not get a cavity, are you willing to pay me $100 every year as a subscription fee for the absence of cavities? And now I'm going to say, okay, right? And now previously I couldn't do that because I didn't know whether you were using my toothbrush correctly or not, but now I can do that, right? So all of a sudden I could have, for instance, a pay for performance contract. Now, next thing, right, you're not having cavities. Well, who else is happy about this? Well, insurance companies are happy about this, right? Because they're usually paying half of the sort of fees that you're paying, which is about, a couple $100 every year. So maybe I can have the insurance companies subsidize my toothbrush to you, right? So now I can maybe get some revenue from insurance companies. So the first thing was we can change the what is being paid for, right? So is it just kind of the product, or is it like a service and a performance guarantee? Right. The second thing we can change is who is paying, right? Quite often there are other parties in the ecosystem that generate value from my product. Well, maybe I'm able to extract that value from them. Sure. Thirdly, I can maybe say, well, maybe with toothbrushes, it's not maybe the best idea, right? But I could charge you 10 cents for every minute you use a toothbrush. Now, I couldn't do this before. You say, well, that'd be rather silly with a toothbrush, right? But for instance, with jet engines are now being sold that way, right? So Rolls-Royce is not selling a jet engine anymore to an airline. They are selling what's called power by the hour. So they're basically saying, I'm selling you an hour of flying time, right? And now again, that is a nice incentive alignment for the airline and the jet engine producer, right? Because the airline just says, I only care if this engine is working, not if it's broken, right? And so now Rolls-Royce has a very high incentive to make sure that engine is working. And so now they're having gone too much more into the maintenance and what have you, right? But again, so that's kind of the, when are you paying? Now, the other thing is sometimes how we pay can change. So freemium models are actually a very intriguing example of this. So you may know the various games that you play on your phone, like Game of Thrones, Clash of Clans, right, would be one of them. And so if I asked you, would you be willing to pay $350 for a game you play on your phone? You'd probably say no way, right? I'm not going to pay you $350. But now every day you go, oh, just for 99 cents, right? I can get an upgrade that gives me that great Dragon Slayer, and I can level up. Wow, sure. No, what's 99 cents, right? I mean, just paid $3.95 for a cup of coffee at Starbucks. So how about 99 cents, right? And you do this every day, and after a year, you spend $360. And as a matter of fact, you don't feel bad about this. Why? Because every day, actually, it was an enjoyable experience that you had, right? And so if you can pull the time when the person actually experiences the value of your product and service, if you can make that more closer to the point when the customer is actually paying, right? Because again, if a customer derives value over time, if I try to extract all of that value at the time of purchase, that might be really difficult, right? But if I can charge you a little bit every time you use it, because at that time you really see the value in the product or in the service, right? You may be much more willing to pay at that time just a little bit, right? So those are at least sort of some ideas, kind of, right? How connectivity can actually allow us to have a much broader way of kind of different types of revenue models.
Well, and it also, I think, brings things full circle, right? So it's not that we're doing these things, to essentially fit within our existing model of business. This is, like you were saying, it's opening up, new opportunities of revenue that we're possibly not taking advantage of that we could. And, you mentioned even that Rolls-Royce example with the jet engines. It's like, I think you kind of hit it on a little bit, is that they're actually selling the engine, but the entire servicing element that goes along with it, because for them, as we all have heard over and over, it's not the profit or the revenue that they get from the sales of engines. It is the whole servicing aspect, and then the whole ongoing control of maintenance, right? And it just actually, from a brand perspective, is more beneficial for them.
Right, and so now again, intriguingly, and this is actually a general principle here. There's sort of learning happening at two different levels. So there's the learning at the level of an individual customer, or in the Rolls-Royce example, the learning about an individual engine, right? So I learn more and more about this engine in some sense of I know exactly the state of each component inside that engine. And so I'm now able actually to go from a fixed maintenance schedule where every 6 months I replace this particular component. Now I can replace it after 5 months if I need it, or after 7 months if I need it, right? So I can do this much more effectively. But there's also learning at the whole level of a population, either a population of customers, or in this case, a population of jet engines, because I've not just sold you one engine, but I've sold, hundreds of engines to, let's say, United. And now what Rolls-Royce is doing is, now I'm learning about all of these engines. I learn about weather, I learn about your routing, and I can now actually help you run your machines more efficiently, think about routing more efficiently, right? And so now I'm starting to save you even fuel, right? And so again, there's a kind of a common theme here that what connected strategies allow you to do is kind of what we would call moving up the hierarchy of needs of a customer, right? So there are sort of some fundamental immediate needs that I have, but quite often they are more kind of instantiations of deeper underlying needs, right? So maybe just one other example, I might feel some heart palpitation right now and I really want to talk to a cardiologist really quickly, but really what I would like you to do is to deal with my cardiac problems. Well, really what I would like you to do is to deal with my health issues, whether it's my heart or my elbow, and really what I'd like you to do is to keep me healthy, right? There's sort of this hierarchy of needs, right? And as we are getting deeper connected with the customer, we might be able to move up this hierarchy of needs, and that really leads to two important consequences, right? On the one hand, kind of again, my happiness as a customer goes up, right? And so I'm willing to pay more for these things because these are really more fundamental needs that I have. And secondly, for the firm, once I actually have achieved this level of a trusted long-term customer relationship, all of a sudden I don't have to compete transaction by transaction anymore, right? So all of a sudden I have you now in a relationship, and of course I still have to provide value to you. That's not changing, but I don't have to compete transaction by transaction, right? Which is really tough to do if you have to do this every time you're interacting with the customer.
Well, and okay, so we've said it repeatedly, and ultimately it drills back down to emotion, right? And we talk about emotion in a lot of different ways on the Fast Leader Show. One of the things that we look at are quotes, because they can help give us the emotion that we need in order to persevere and achieve and all of that. Is there a favorite quote that you like that you can share?
I don't think I have a favorite quote. One of our favorite examples that we have in the book is kind of the magic band in Disney World, right? Which again kind of gets to this dual purpose of, on the one hand, creating a better customer experience where customers have make it much easier for them to purchase things and to open the hotel room, open the fast lane, but on the same time allowing Disney to create much more efficient park operations because they know where people are, they can direct them to shorter lines. But I don't know whether I'm getting to a quote here or a quotable statement, but the intriguing thing to us again is, right, so if you take the example of, you walk with your girl at Disney World and Jack Sparrow comes up and greets your daughter by name, right? Says, "Hi, Sophia, how are you?" Right? And Sophia says, "Wow, that's amazing, right? Jack Sparrow knows my name." Well, of course he knows the name because, right, Sophia is wearing a magic band and Jack Sparrow has a little handheld device that tells him that Sophia is coming, right? And then Jack Sparrow says, "And Sophia, do you remember we met at Anaheim last year?" Right? And Sophia goes, "Well, this is like the most amazing day in my world," right? Because Jack Sparrow knows kind of that any character that ever interacted with Sophia in any theme park around the world, right? So Sophia thinks that is like the most magic day in her life, and you as a parent go, "Man, that's creepy," right? And so I think, and then here's now my quote, right? Connected strategies quite often run exactly at that border between magic and creepy, right? And that's sort of where we coming back, right, kind of to this earlier point that I made of, you really have to understand your customer really well, because again, what one person might think is a magic experience, the other person might think it's a creepy experience, right? And so that's, I think, kind of the big point to keep in mind as you develop these connected strategies, that again, it's not just one size fits all, right? We need to have a broad array of these different kind of experiences that we can offer, and we need to understand, again, sort of, coming back to the word emotion, right? Kind of that emotional attachment that people have of how they want to interact with us, right? And some people just want to have a standoff, let me tell you what I want, but then make it as easy for me as possible, right? Kind of that's the response to desire, whereas others say, just do it for me. I love it.
Well, I would dare to say that when you start looking at coming to this culmination of your work, and I know it's never going to end. I mean, there's going to be iterations. I think the marketplace is going to force it. I think globalization is going to force it. AI, artificial intelligence is going to force it. I mean, all of these things, and finding a better spot for the human to create some of those emotional connections that cause that multiple revenue generation opportunities, and all that's going to happen. So your work's never going to end here. However, we all often have to go through humps in order for us to come, to these realizations and to learn and to be able to take advantage of these opportunities and to teach others like you're doing now. Is there a time where you've gotten over the hump, where you learned something that we can all learn something from?
So it was really interesting when we talked to the Disney team that created this Magic Band. There was some very interesting learning coming out, touching on something that you were earlier asking, and that is, how to actually create these connected strategies and what are the big obstacles, right? And so again, we first thought about, well, it's about, again, the technology, right? Creating the Magic Band is a difficult thing, and they said, yeah, that was sort of important, but that's just money you spend, right? And then you get your R&D department going and you create these technologies. The really tough thing was the organizational change. How do we actually have different parts of our organization talk to each other and share information with each other, right? And so the problem, and this is another little interesting quote that he said, is we really forced our customers to work through our organizational chart. Right? Sometimes you had to deal with our online division, then you had to deal with our theme park division, then we had to deal with our hotel division, right? And we basically kind of asked the customer to stitch together these experiences, right? And that, I think, is, again, to me, kind of very interesting insight that, we all talk about customer centricity as being sort of a key word, right? We want to really put the customer in the middle, but we ourselves are not at all organized that way, right? Our organizations are very much organized by function or by product line. And again, sort of when I reflected on that, said, wow, we are as universities probably as guilty of this as anyone, right? So we tell our students, you want to be a general manager, you need to know everything, right? You need a bit of finance and strategy and marketing and operations, right? And then all of that you need to know. And of course, but we are organized by department, right? And so someone guys teach you strategy, someone accounting, someone marketing. And then we say to the student, well, and you stitch this all together and you make sure kind of that all kind of comes together so that you're a well-rounded manager, right? And so again, this idea of putting yourself into the shoes of a customer or of a student and saying, okay, so how would that experience actually look like, right? It's hard organizationally.
Well, I appreciate the works that you're doing and that you're continuing to do. And the Fast Leader Legion wishes you the very best.
Now, before we move on, let's get a quick word from our sponsor. An Even Better Place to Work is an easy-to-use solution that gives you a continuous diagnostic on employee engagement along with integrated activities that will improve employee engagement and leadership skills in everyone. Using this award-winning solution is guaranteed to create motivated, productive, and loyal employees who have great work relationships with their colleagues and your customers. To learn more about An Even Better Place to Work, visit beyondmorale.com/better.
Okay, Fast Leader Legion, now it's time for the Hump Day Hoedown. Okay, Nicolaj. The Hump Day Hoedown is a part of our show where you give us good insights back. So I'm going to ask you several questions, and your job is to give us robust and rapid responses to help us move onward and upward faster. Nicolaj Siggelkow, are you ready to hoe down?
Well, as a German, I will try my best.
I appreciate that. So what do you think is holding you back from being an even better leader today?
I'm afraid I'm not very good at delegating.
What is the best leadership advice you have ever received?
Surround yourself with people who are smarter than you are.
And what is one of your secrets that you believe contributes to your success?
I'm a really good planner, but that's maybe because I'm German.
And what do you feel is one of your best tools that helps you lead in business or life?
My calendar. I need to have structure to my days.
And what would be one book that you'd recommend to our Legion? It could be from any genre. Of course, we're going to put a link to Connected Strategy on your show notes page as well.
Yeah, so that, of course, is the most important book. But personally, I love books by Neil Stephenson, all kind of novels, great books.
Okay, Fast Leader Legion, you can find links to that and other bonus information from today's show by going to fastleader.net/Nicolaj Siggelkow. Okay, Nicolaj, this is my last Hump Day Hoedown question. Imagine you were given the opportunity to go back to the age of 25, and you could take the knowledge and skills that you have now back with you, but you can't take it all back. You can only choose one. So what skill or piece of knowledge would you take back with you, and why?
Well, I think it is the kind of the skill to kind of communicate better with other people. Kind of really trying to understand sort of where people are coming from and really kind of tailoring kind of the way you communicate with other people. That's, I think, kind of a skill that I'm still learning. But certainly I hope I'm now a little bit better than I was when I was 25.
Nicolaj, it was an honor to spend time with you today. Can you please share with the Fast Leader Legion how they can connect with you?
Absolutely. So you can just go to nicolajsiggelkow.com. from my personal website, or if you want to go to the book website, that's connected-strategy.com.
Nicolaj Siggelkow, thank you for sharing your knowledge and wisdom. The Fast Leader Legion honors you and thanks you for helping us get over the hump.
Thank you for joining me on the Fast Leader Show today. For recaps, links from every show, special offers, and access to download and subscribe, if you haven't already, head on over to fastleader.net so we can help you move onward and upward faster.